The topic of today's Underdog Bestball segment is rookies to target now before the NFL draft. So basically, the longer form description of it is guys that are going at a certain ADP that it's not going to be anywhere close to that potentially 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now. After the draft, people go nuts about the landing spot. People go higher, or these particular players go higher than what is being expected, what is being regurgitated in draft media, what you see from cookie cutter mock drafts all over the place. Like, oh, I don't remember seeing his name in this guy's 2-round mock. All of a sudden, he goes second round. Things change drastically. So, who fits the bill for you as far as ADP values among rookies before the draft?
So I'm probably not going to target him, especially now that the price is only going up anyway. But one guy who it seems like could go from being undrafted, probably as recently as last week, to being something like, I don't know, if we're calling if we're calling it a best ball underdog super flex, it might only still be like something like 15th, 14th round. But in one quarterback, it might prove to be top 10 rounds even. Is Jonathan Mingo. I don't think he really profiles as a high target player, but it seems like if you picked him already, you probably got some kind of capital out of that. Or it's nice to get some player in the 20th round who eventually starts going in the 12th or 14th. Even if they end up being a bad value in the 12th and the 14th, it's like it's good to get cheap free exposure. I don't know if there's still time to do it, but you can, I think, assume after the draft, Mingo, who could go in the first 40 picks, his price will go up. And so, for instance, John, the draft that you did the other day, you got him in the 19th, correct?
Yes.
So yeah, you got him in the 19th. I would imagine that after the draft, he's probably going to go after the draft earlier than where you took Marvin Mims and where the next team took Jalen Hyatt in the 15th round. If Mingo goes in the top 40, and as long as if he goes in the top 40 and doesn't end up on some nightmares, if he's on the Bears, I guess maybe that wouldn't really raise his price necessarily. But pretty much anything else, I think, as long as he goes where he's currently projected, he will go eventually much higher in best ball too.
Yeah, the Mingo stuff is interesting. I've noticed that he's definitely gotten some helium, or not necessarily helium in the ADP, but definitely a lot more discourse about Jonathan Mingo of late. Being an Ole Miss receiver, kind of big physical type of guy, like you said, probably doesn't profile as the high target type, but someone that you can utilize deep down the field. He's got the athleticism. I think that he's interesting. Certainly
He's a really standout blocker too. So you can imagine Mingo going a lot earlier than like pass catching projections would lead you to assume, because teams look at Mingo not just for like the targets that he can draw, but the structural benefit of having a 220 pounder who blocks, in a way that makes it a problem for most corners. And yet, if you try to counter his physical presence with like a safety type, a 210, 220 pound defensive back, chances are that player can't run with Mingo down the sideline. So he's like a kind of player who's just structurally helpful, even if he's not drawing targets. And I think he could be pretty tough on like a run heavy team that does play action a lot. Because if the defense is crashing at the run at all, if he's getting bigger personnel to offset him, being the physical presence that he is, it's just tough to track that kind of athlete with that kind of reach down the seam.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I'll put it to you this way. Do we want to sum this up as don't take Quentin Johnston in whatever round he is, take Jonathan Mingo at his ADP?
Yeah, there's a non-zero chance Mingo goes ahead of Johnston. I think it would be kind of silly, but these things do happen. But Johnston, I assume he's slipping basically every day. It seems like there's just this really the consensus is souring on him all of a sudden, and I don't know why. I guess it's maybe people really wanted him to run like a 4.440 at the TCU Pro Day. He ran something more like a 4.55, and If he's a 4.55 guy, then he's not fast enough to be the same big play threat in the NFL as he was in college. The reason I still think Johnston is fine, admittedly not as good as I hoped he would be before the pre-draft testing, but I think he's going to be fine because he probably played more around 200 and he ran the 40 at 213 for some reason. And I bet when he gets down to 200, he basically turns back into a DJ Chark kind of guy. It's just, there is a valid criticism with Johnston that he, for a big receiver, is not very helpful at the catch point. He needs to be open, and if it's a contested target, there's reason to worry he won't come down with it. So he might only be like a Donovan Peoples-Jones or something like that. I consider DJ Chark to be kind of like a notch above Peoples-Jones. So yeah, maybe the Chark thing isn't on the table, but I also think it's fine if he's somewhat one-dimensional. Like he's not going to be a target guy, but him too. Putting Quentin Johnston on fly routes and post routes on especially if you get the defense a little bit gassed, get him off the play action, like that's going to work just fine. It's just he's not going to be the first 2 receivers taken, I don't think, and he might not be in the first 3 or 4 taken in a certain like doomsday scenario.
Things seem to have maybe overly soured with QJ. Give me some other guys whose ADPs you expect to go up. A couple that I thought I think everyone should be getting as much Marvin Mims as physically possible right now. I mean, he's available like in the 15th round, something like that, maybe even a little bit later. Go ahead and jump the ADP by a round or two. I'm comfortable doing that, especially given some of the other players around him. Your guy Tyler Scott is still essentially free in best ball drafts, so go ahead and spend your 20th round pick on that. Thank us later. Do you think that Zach Charbonnet or Devin Achane could see major, or I guess Israel Abanikanda actually is the one that I think whose price could go up the most among running backs?
He's had a bit of a price jump. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see what it would have been in the big board. The big board one quarterback, because in this draft that you did, John, Abanikanda went in the 12th round. And I feel like by super flex standards, that's almost like the 9th or something, or by one quarterback standards, I should have said. So that's the highest I've seen him go, basically. And I'm kind of surprised because like even after the pro day, on the one quarterback, the big board, is like the ADP never adjusted. Like people just kind of never adjusted to the news with him or Tyler Scott, like you said. And it's like these guys are going to go higher than people are currently projecting, and almost as much as it's the case that like Abanikanda, Achane, who's that other one? Charbonnet. Yeah, they could all go higher, and I somewhat expect they all will. Charbonnet, just people are just sleeping on him, and I don't understand it at all. It's so easy to see why he's a starting NFL running back, a starting above average running back, and like really good fantasy asset to have. It's just kind of like stubbornness and willful ignorance at this point that you can't get more people to understand why he's clearly better than someone like James Cook, whatever, lessers tend to go in his range of the ADP. So we just have like a really bad era of draft analysis in the fantasy scene where people are just getting really confused and don't know how to evaluate players. They get more caught up in like vibe-based assessments, and then they fill in like their gaps of knowledge otherwise with these proprietary metrics that are sloppily defined and are conducted by people who don't understand football well enough to make the calls on the definitions in the first place. It's a mess. And these things will be cleared up to some extent by the draft. In the draft, when Abanikanda goes in the 3rd round or whatever, and people basically look at him for the first, these people who had been taking like Roshan Johnson and Ty J. Spears instead all this time, they'll look at him for the first time because the NFL told them to,
Right.
And then their opinion will catch up and the ADP will jump.
So some of that he won't be the Trey Sermon,
right? The Tyrion Davis price, one of my favorites of all time. Anyway, so you got people just as much as you could say that Abanikanda, Charbonnet, Achane go up. Even more certainty I can put on the fact that pretty much all of those other rookie running backs that people have been hyping all offseason are going to go way later than they have been. Roshan Johnson, Tank
Spears.
Bigsby. Spears, and to be clear, I like Spears. I think he's a clearly talented runner with the ball, but people aren't thinking about how much the NFL will care about a 200-pound rushing specialist backup who isn't much of a pass catcher and has a knee history to boot.
Mhm.
So he's a role player. He's a good role player. He'll be explosive, but he's not going to be a 15 carry running back, let alone a 20 carry one.
Yeah.
But
So basically, if you have interest in those guys, like that's
hold
fine,
off.
I suppose, but just hold off
Yeah.
until after the draft to go ahead and get the discount. And then if you end up being right, you end up being right, like doubly so, just because you get some added value as opposed to reaching for them at their ADP. But that's going to round it out